There's a bunch of things that nobody really talks about with ketosis, things that you didn't know. So let's break them down. The first one, ketosis is starvation. It is fasting mimicking. Okay, keto zealots and keto gurus they're just not going to tell you that because it sounds bad, but it is starvation. It's just not typical starvation. Doesn't mean it's bad. See, fasting is starvation, but in a controlled setting, it works really well, right? See, here's where they're very similar. Ketosis is fasting mimicking because you are doing the same sort of metabolic thing. As far as energy sources in your body are concerned, you're still demanding that the body learn to use fats and gluconeogenesis for fuel, right? Because you're not providing your body with carbs on a ketogenic diet, you're not giving yourself dietary glucose. You're also not giving yourself dietary glucose when you're fasting, right? So ketosis that is induced by fasting is quite a bit different than ketosis that is induced by going into nutritional ketosis. But a lot of the mechanisms within the body are very similar. For example, like one of the main benefits of fasting is the fact that we improve what is called the NAD to NADH ratio. This is largely talked about in the healthy aging community, in the longevity community. And nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide is in essence something that carries an electron over into the mitochondria and ultimately allows us to be able to produce acetyl coenzyme A. Okay, so long story short, fasting frees up some of this NAD because it's not having to be busy carrying glucose all the time. So that NAD goes around and it does positive things like activate specific things like sirtuins that are pro-longevity genes. Okay, I could go on and on about that. So it's basically the absence of glucose that is freeing up the ability for this NAD to go do positive things. Well, guess what? Ketosis also yields the absence of glucose. So you have very similar mechanisms there. You're just achieving it via two different pathways. So yes, it's still starvation, but you get a lot of the benefits. So ketosis is fasting mimicking. So that is why they work so well together. This next one is ketosis is a cleaner fuel. Okay, this is something that people don't talk about all the time, and when they do talk about it, they really abbreviate it and kind of shorten it a little too much. Yes, ketones burn cleaner, there's less reactive oxygen species, but ketones also sort of clean up a lot. Now, what I mean by that is when you are producing energy, you have this thing called the electron transport chain, and electrons are passed down through like a proton gradient. And the best way that I can describe this is imagine a freeway with a bunch of cars, and the cars are electrons, and they're just running down this freeway going really fast. Well, occasionally a car is going to decide to go up the freeway the wrong direction, and all the cars are going to go, they're going to freak out and they're going to like spin off in different directions, and some of them are going to go off the freeway. Well, those rogue electrons, those are going to become reactive oxygen species, or they're going to, just again, simplifying this, okay, and that's going to create oxidative stress. Well, that's naturally happening. Now, when you have ketones in the equation, ketones improve the driving force of the electron transport chain. They basically improve how powerful that force is. So now, again, for the same analogy, imagine that you have that same freeway with a bunch of cars that are electrons. This time they're going way faster, but they're also like tanks instead of cars. Okay, so then when one of these things decides to turn around and go the wrong way up the freeway, they're going fast enough and have enough velocity that they just kind of plow through it instead of having all these cars split off. So you're ending up with less reverse electron transport. And that is really why it ends up being cleaner with less ROS on a ketogenic diet than on a non-ketogenic diet. Next one is one that people just really don't want to talk about, but if you explain it, it's not that bad. Yes, when you start a ketogenic diet, your gut microbiome will change and your gut diversity will probably decrease. There is even a study that showed that within the first couple of weeks of a ketogenic diet, gut diversity it went down. Like there was just a decline in the diversity of the gut microbiome. So gut diversity literally got worse. Now, when you look at that preliminary stuff, that preliminary data, it's easy to say, oh, I don't want to do keto, that's bad. And I can understand that. But when you look further at the data, you see that 12 weeks in, things start to stabilize and start to get to a healthier level, and they come kind of back to baseline. And then after 24 weeks, and you're getting 6 months into doing a ketogenic diet, your actual markers can improve, your diversity can improve. So it takes some time, and you have to be committed, but it's all relative because your body is going to adapt and adjust in terms of diversity based upon how long you're doing something. You also have to remember that triggering a change in your gut is not always bad, okay? It's a hormetic stressor. So by changing your diet, where your body has to rapidly adapt and make changes, that's going to make your gut more resilient and stronger. Just like if you were to go ahead and start eating a bunch of fiber and a bunch of plant-based foods all of a sudden, it might cause you some gastric distress, it might make you feel uncomfortable, it might even make you feel inflamed and weird, but that's because your body is adapting, and then your gut microbiome expands and, adjust accordingly. Same thing is happening with keto. It just takes some time. Now, when you're getting started, sometimes it does help to utilize a little extra fiber, some psyllium, just some prebiotic fibers, and it definitely doesn't hurt to add a probiotic into the mix. The one that I typically recommend is called Seed, and I put a link down below. They are what is called a synbiotic. So it's a probiotic and a prebiotic. They are a sponsor and a supporter of this channel, but it's the one that I would recommend and the one that my family uses. So they have a really cool technology, which I've talked about before, but basically that synbiotic, it has 2 capsules, a capsule like inside of a capsule, and it kind of breaks down. So it breaks down in stages as you digest it, which amounts for potentially better deliverability, which is exactly what we're after. But the best thing about Seed is they're doing a lot of research in the world of the microbiome, which just makes it great to know that they're actually putting their best foot forward with that. But with the ketogenic lifestyle, I do think it's wise as you're kind of easing into keto that, yeah, you probably should add a probiotic into the mix. It's probably a pretty wise choice. So again, big thank you to Seed for the support on this channel. And if you use that link, you can save 15% down below. So again, that link is going to get you 15% off of that Seed Daily Synbiotic. So down below in the description. The next one is that keto is going to give you bad breath. I mean, yes, you may be someone that's not going to get the keto breath thing, but it is. It's not a myth. Like, people are out there saying keto's not going to give you bad breath. It probably will when you first start. But here's what's going on. It's fat metabolism at its best. When you break down fat, one of the byproducts is acetone. Now, normally this acetone is in small enough amounts that it can go to the liver, gets broken down, and then chemical components of the acetone are used to make other substrates, glucose, things like that. It's really not a big deal because it's happening on a pace that our body can handle. But when we all of a sudden start increasing the fat intake and decrease the carbs, and we go from 30% of our diet being fats to 60, 70, 80% of our diet being fats, that's a lot for your body to take on. So you have full spectrum acetone that's just looking for a way out. Well, the quickest way out is for you to breathe it out. So you're going to have that sweet smelling breath, and that's just a body kind of just adjusting to fats. As you get fat adapted, you have less of this kind of overage of fats as your body becomes more efficient at utilizing it. So then the fat that is liberated, the body can utilize, it can upregulate all these processes. It's a perfectly natural thing, and it means that things are working. For some reason, people want to avoid it or avoid talking about it because it sounds so negative, but it's just the way things are. The next one is that you absolutely can do keto for too long. Again, we have to step back and take a realistic, unbiased approach in this. I've been doing keto for largely about 10 years, but I still go off and on of it because, yes, there is evidence that you can do it for too long. And I don't think it's one of those things where it's going to be like hugely detrimental to your life, but there's some studies that show that it can decrease your glucose tolerance, which is something you should pay attention to. There's a 2021 study that was published in the International Journal of Sports Nutrition and Exercise Metabolism that found that habitual ketogenic dieters that were cyclists ended up having a decrease in what's called their GLUT4 transporters within their muscle. Okay, that means that they were less able to process carbohydrates. They were less able to handle glucose. They had become glucose intolerant. And this is in athletes. So people that are moving a lot, their body was just like resistant to utilizing those carbohydrates very well. Then if you look at some other studies, you see that 8 weeks of a ketogenic diet in rats will trigger some glucose intolerance. But what people don't always explain or understand is that once you go off of keto, like in this rat study, it took them 1 week of eating a normal chow diet before they had restored everything back to normal, like as if they had never done a ketogenic diet. So on one hand, that's good. On one hand, that's bad, right? A lot of the work that you do with the ketogenic diet can quickly be undone if you're not careful. But on the other hand, if you're doing a ketogenic diet and you want to be able to bounce back and forth and have some carbs every now and then and still be able to handle glucose, you're probably wise to do that every 8 to 12, maybe 16 weeks. Go on keto, then bounce off for a couple of weeks and allow your body the ability to still utilize glucose so you're not glucose intolerant. Because yeah, one could argue that you could walk a fine line towards insulin resistance if you were to do keto for too long and then all of a sudden start loading up a bunch of carbohydrates. But it would take quite a bit of carbohydrates in contrast to the ketogenic lifestyle to really have that happen. Another one that's not talked about a lot is keto's relationship with leptin sensitivity. See, we always think that we want to increase leptin levels. Okay, when in the world of fat loss, like we want more leptin because leptin signals the brain to burn more fat. And yes, we want more leptin. But honestly, when you look at the population, at least here in the United States, like most of us are overweight, if not obese. We are not dealing with not enough leptin. We're dealing with so much leptin that we have leptin resistance. Okay, so one of the things that we need to look at is stop looking at things in terms of I need to spike my leptin and trigger my metabolism. No, we need to reduce leptin. And the way that we reduce leptin is, well, quite honestly, utilizing a lower calorie diet for one, or a ketogenic diet. But if you look at a study that's published in the journal Lipids, it compared eukcaloric diets, it compared ketogenic diet and a low fat diet, equal calories, and the low-carb ketogenic diet had a 42% decrease in leptin levels, whereas the low-fat diet only had an 18% decrease in leptin values. So therefore, the ketogenic diet, at least pertaining to this study, is going to give us a better fighting chance at lessening of that leptin resistance. Once we lessen the leptin resistance and we improve leptin sensitivity, then when we do secrete leptin, it's going to actually get to the brain where it needs to go so we can actually burn the fat that we need to burn. So again, it's something that's not talked about because I think it gets swept under the rug because most of the keto community doesn't want to admit that keto is actually lessening leptin levels. But in reality, lower leptin levels are good. It's what we are after as a society because we are largely an overweight society. If you're a super ripped fitness model that's trying to then it's a different story. But let's be real here and look at the people that actually need the help. Another one that people don't talk about, and again, because it's a little bit complicated, is the ketogenic diet will probably make you sweat more. Okay, the fact is, when you're on a ketogenic diet, you have an improvement in what are called uncoupling proteins. It's actually a weird inefficiency. Okay, ketones can allow the browning and the beiging of white fat. Okay, what that means is you're going to have more fat that is active in terms of creating heat. So basically, you have, through this whole process of creating energy, an inefficiency that is dissipating some of your energy as heat. Now, again, this sounds like a bad thing, but in reality, it can actually help you burn more fat too. That's why you may notice when you do keto, or if you pay close attention, that when you're working out, you sweat a little bit easier. Or when you're walking around, you just feel like you're running a little bit hotter. Most people that do keto aren't complaining about being cold. They're usually complaining about running a little hot. It's kind of interesting if you pay attention to it. It's just not a bad thing. It's just the way things are. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.